How you guys doing? This is Andrew from FloryPB. If you watched my first video about me babbling in my introduction, I probably said that I like angels in some kind of long, drawn-out way. And we're going to start by comparing the first two electronic markers that were available, the PVI Shocker and the Angel LED. Now, we're going to skip the Angel for right now and talk about the Shocker a little bit. Then we'll talk about the Angel. In briefness, I'm going to go into a much more in-depth version of the LEDs and what they came with. They were really cool markers. Let's start talking about the Shocker first. This is the PVI Shocker. You might remember Smart Parts Shockers, which, it's PVI was the original maker of this marker, and then Smart Parts somehow bought them out, bought the patent. I don't know exactly how that went down. Someone does please comment about it. That'd be cool. But this was really, I think, the first actual electric marker you could buy. This one came out in like 96, and I think the Angel actually officially came out around 97. They had the V6 in 96. That was their prototype they were showing around. And the Shocker kind of looks nothing like the Angel. If you want to look at modern markers, the Angel is probably closer to what a modern marker looks like. This is probably the base style that you would see in a more modern marker, and with a macro line coming from an on-off, or in this case, it probably was just a bottom line to the mini reg, or to the regulator up front. This is a pretty standard thing that you've seen for a very long time. No one changed it for a long time. But the other mark was the Shocker, which might not look that modern, but it had some cool features to it that a lot of modern markers went back to through time. Just a couple quick breakdowns. This is actually a spool valve marker. It's the first electronic spool valve marker that was available. Interesting, right? But spool valve marker is actually closed bolt. And that's something neat. You don't see that now. You see a lot of open bolt markers, besides maybe autocockers and stuff like that. But you don't see any closed bolt markers. But it's something that I think you might see a comeback of it soon. Just because everything kind of goes full circle. But they have one advantage. Now that the way we play paintball now, in tournament paintball at least, you have a firing cap of 10 balls a second. And, back in 2005 to 2010, you had the speed race where everyone was shooting 15 balls per second or more. And you need an open bolt marker so you can get paint down there and still cycle it fast enough while paint still had time to fall. But now we're back at 10 balls a second, and it's a slower pace of the gun or the marker firing itself. I think you're going to see some advertisement and some maybe usefulness of with a closed bolt marker, because your ball's already in your barrel. The first thing that happens is you fire your shot, so you actually let your gas up through the chamber, up through your bolt, and hit your ball. And you can do that faster with a closed bolt marker, and your ball can leave your barrel. Your first ball can leave your barrel before an open bolt marker can if you both pull the trigger at exactly the same time. Just because your cycle time can be less because you're not pushing the ball forward as you're letting the stuff go. As you're letting the gas go. Ugh. Sorry about that. But I bet you're going to see that come back just for that sole purpose, that you can fire your first ball faster. And when everyone's shooting 10 balls a second, you're going to get your first ball out of the barrel before the other guy does. It's going to be a split millisecond, but hey, whatever sells things at this point, everything's so good now, it's hard to sell markers. So here's what it is. This is, as I said, a closed bolt marker. It had two solenoids in it, and you have to arm them both. There's a little arm button. Let me try to zoom in if you can't see it. Let's see if I can focus in on that. I hope you guys can see that. So you take the switch, hit armed, you flip it over, zoom. You get armed on the other side, and no lights come on, nothing really happens, but hope the microphone can pick this up. When you pull the trigger, you can hear both solenoids click. It's a marker that works. It's not super reliable. It was very inefficient at the time. It's just trash efficiency-wise. It's incredibly slow, these old Shockers. I think they shot maybe 6 to 8 balls a second. But they're super smooth, partially because they're so damn heavy. But they shoot super smooth. It's such a cool shot. But they don't really go that fast. Another interesting thing about the original Shocker, the PVI, this tube here is your battery tube, and this has AA batteries in it. So like hoppers and like some markers are going back to, they have AA batteries. Another thing that you see, let me turn this off real quick. Another thing with this marker that you see a lot more modern markers is this had a quick strip bolt. You can take the whole bolt system out fairly fast. It's just a couple threads. It was very nice threading. It's a pretty coarse thread. I don't know exactly what the thread is. It's dual lead too. So you got a thread starting on this side and a thread that starts there. So it spins on super fast. See if I can zoom in and show you guys that. Just gonna get a light in there. Hope you guys can see that. But one side of the threads starts here. Then if you flip it over 180 degrees, your other piece of thread starts here. So this is two sets of threads, and it's a dual threaded or a dual lead thread setup, which is cool. Helps this thing actually go faster. Helps you be able to unscrew this faster than you would something that has a single lead, like an autococker barrel, where it takes forever to unscrew the damn thing. But yeah, it was a nice quick strip. And this is, you know, the birth of electronic spool valve markers. So it's closed bolt, so it was sitting in this position with the ball in front. It would fire, then it would come back, load a ball, go forward again. And, you know, it's a cool marker, definitely for the longest time. The Angel was the marker that looked like everything else, and everything kind of looked like an old Angel. But there are features to this that are definitely coming back, and features that we've seen that were recycled. And it's a cool marker. It's definitely a cool marker to shoot, but again, it's hard to shoot. It's not very reliable. It's not very efficient. I wouldn't want to play a whole day with this anymore. Definitely, it's right feed, which I personally hate right feed. It's basically going out one side of my bunker always. I don't like that so much. Now we're going to move on to the marker I like more, and the one I'm more interested in, which is the old Angel LED. Now again, this one looks just like a modern marker how it's set up. Maybe it's not spaced so long like some of the more modern stuff is now, but I like the way these feel. They feel very comfortable to me, at least the way I grew up playing paintball. And they just feel right. They're a little heavy, but they are very efficient still. You can get about 1,400 to 1,600 balls out of a 6845 on this. And this is a single trigger, but if you get a double trigger Angel, it will shoot just as fast as your hopper can shoot. It can keep up with anything. This can probably keep up with anything as is. If you work on the trigger a little bit and you hit it fast enough, it will definitely keep up with 10 balls a second. This had a couple firing modes in it too, and you can make these things rip if you really want to. There's no eyes or anything or any ball detection, so I wouldn't exactly suggest that. On-off switch is just here. And there's a light. This one's kind of dead right now. We're going to rebuild this marker. That's one of the first markers we do, hopefully. But this light here turns green when you turn it on, and every time you fire the trigger, it glows red as a solenoid clicks. So that's why it's called the Angel LED, mostly because of that. Now this differs from the Shocker because this isn't a spool valve marker. This is a poppet, like an autococker, or almost like a blowback as well. There's also poppet valve markers, or something a little more modern like an Intimidator or G6R or an Ego or LV1 or whatever they're calling it now, LVR or whatever it is. And yeah, it's a spool valve. It's not a spool valve marker. It's a poppet valve marker. Had a ram cartridge in the back and a hammer here. And here's the valve. The hammer comes forward, smacks the valve. The bolt is attached to the hammer, so they both go forward at the same time. Smack the valve, opens up, lets the air through. No rocket science there as far as paintball markers go. The LPR sits about here in front of the valve. And the mini reg, like I showed you guys earlier, was here. This is actually an older one. This is like a 97 to early 98 model. And the way you can tell that is because of this mini reg here. This reg has the push button on off and no milling on it. And it has the warning on it right here, which thankfully stayed together through all time. But let's see if I can zoom in on that. Maybe you guys can see the warning here, which is kind of neat. But this is an older one. Realistically, this is completely stock, minus the feed neck. That would just come with a regular shank before, and you had an adapter and tried to squeeze a hopper on it. But again, these were threaded, so you could just put a more modern feed neck on it, and there's hundreds of Angel feed necks available out there somewhere, if you can find one now, but it's not too hard to get parts for that. You know, this marker, these are a blast to shoot. They're probably one of the funnest Angels that I think to shoot. And they're heavy, but they keep up with anything. They're kind of a pain in the ass to work on compared to a little more modern Angel like an LCD. But I'll go through that when I do the more dedicated video to it. Another part I should show you because it's an Angel is a roto breach setup here. Yeah, this thing's a mess. We gotta clean it. But the bolt comes out like that. It was nice to see the first electronic poppet valve marker had a nice enclosed bolt. It did lead to one major drawback of the Angel design though. Because we have this nice genius roto breach setup, it also makes a spacing issue, which you see we have this feed neck here, which is a threaded feed neck. So the actual spot where the ball goes, there's has to be meat. You need meat on this side because the threads have to go somewhere to screw in. You got some meat in your feed neck, and what that does is it leaves a tiny gap. And the bolt, if you see the bolt fits in the roto breach perfectly. So the bolt sits here perfectly, and when you close it, you get stuck with the gap between the front of the roto breach and where your ball actually comes. And what that does is when your gun's kind of pointed back or forward a little bit, mostly backwards like this, if you tilt your gun backwards, the ball comes in and rolls back against the bolt. So it takes a couple tenths of an inch back. And then the second ball kind of falls down on top of it. So the ball, when it goes through, it has to push the second ball up to go past it. And when you're using an old gravity-fed hopper, an old Revy, that's not really much of a problem. But when you had a more modern hopper like a Halo that came out, Angels didn't do too well with Halos. Primarily because it was so much force coming down this ball. When you push this one past it, it would break it. They would break against each other or something else happen. You chop the ball because it's pushing down. You could chop balls with this stuff. The other thing with the older Angels, they only have one ball detent. So Halos, if you went forward, could actually push paint through it too. It was a mess for a while until they figured it out. But now with a more modern hopper like a Spire or something like that, that's a low force hopper because you're not feeding so fast anymore. They shoot these guns. These markers shoot awesome with those hoppers. Just because they feed paint nice. You never really have a chop, and it's gentle enough not to push the ball around too much. And you don't have much problems. And if you adjust this, you adjust your bolt a little bit. And like I showed you in my first episode, some of the prototype bolts I'm making are a tiny bit longer, which help with that a little more. You can make these shoot pretty reliably. The paint's getting a little smaller too, which is hard, but you can work on it to get a nice shot out of these that you can play all day with this, and it's just a fun marker. This tube, I showed you the other tube last time, this tube actually houses a battery, a rechargeable battery. Had a very proprietary plug, I think it's proprietary in the back, which is hard to get. The LED had its own separate plug. Every Angel after that came with a more standard plug that they all used, and they could all use the same charger, but the LED had a little bit different charger because of the plug. And the old batteries are a NiCad battery in these, which it's crap now, but back in 96, 97, that was pretty cool. Had a nice rechargeable battery, which for the longest time, people hated that. People wanted 9 volts, so wanted to replace their batteries. They didn't want to remember to charge their marker before they went to the field or whatever. But now with some of the high-end markers like the M2, you're starting to see that rechargeable battery come back, or the Lux before that. You start seeing that rechargeable battery come back, and people like them again. So it's just ebb and flow of how things work. You see all this old tech come back as it goes. But this is definitely some of the markers we're going to focus on going forward. I'm going to do a more in-depth view, show you a couple different LEDs, some of the versions. Back then, paintball I thought was cooler because you had custom versions of every gun. Everything was custom machined, not just anodized. And, you know, there's a lot of opportunity with these markers to still customize them, to do things to make them better, to make them fit your game better. And it wasn't just so cookie cutter and soulless. I'm not saying the game was better back then actually to play, but it was just more fun to get these things working and tuned in right, and you felt more accomplished. And we're going to do a lot with these. Hopefully you guys like this, and thanks for watching. Please comment and subscribe.